Hello everybody and welcome to this very biased review. Today I'll be talking about Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Yes, it will mostly be about the expansion. I'll throw in some base Rise stuff when necessary, but it's mostly about Sunbreak. Monster Hunter expansions are usually just the second half of the entire game anyway, so it shouldn't make much of a difference. Just consider the complete version of the game. That being said, welcome to Elgato, the newest outpost in the Monster Hunter series, which, if you haven't realized it yet, is one of my favorite video game franchises ever made. If you're unfamiliar with the series, let me run down the basics for you. Monster Hunter is a pretty simple game, with a simple but effective core loop. You start off hunting rather weak monsters to get the materials, use those materials to make stronger armor and weaponry, then utilize that in order to hunt larger, more dangerous monsters. And you repeat that for quite a while. That is all. The series has been around since 2004, but for quite some time it was only really popular in Japan, failing to grasp more than a niche of players in the West. Yet, with the more recent release of Monster Hunter World on the big home console, the series has become way more popular. So much so that World became Capcom's best-selling singular title ever. Nevertheless, World introduced many new features and changed a lot of Monster Hunter's core, which did somewhat divide the community despite being overall very well received.
Hey!
Following the success of World and Iceborne, we now arrive at Rise and Sunbreak, a more fast-paced game which feels more akin to Generations Ultimate, with special Switch skills that allow for customizable combat while mixing it with World's quality of life changes, and a lot of unique movement options. It's really fun and visually pretty impressive, especially for a Switch game. Just don't look it up on Twitter, people like to get angry there. In fact, don't look anything up on Twitter, you're usually gonna regret it. Anyway, with that introduction out of the way, let me get a bit more specific on the topic of Rise. Being the follow-up title to World is quite a burden, and the game has been met with some more and some less reasonable criticism over time. But now that we basically have the full game in our hands with the G-Rank expansion, no, I'm still not calling it Master Rank, let's see what this game has to offer and what kind of unique experience this ambitious new entry brings to the franchise. Hey, Editor Me here. Just wanted to let you know that I'll be talking about Title Update 1 quite often here. And I usually refer to that as if it wasn't released already. That's because I was sick for a while, so recording audio and all of that got delayed a bit. I intended to get this out before the first title update. This time it wasn't actually supposed to be a late video. So some stuff here might be slightly outdated. I'll edit some info on whenever that happens, but just so you don't get confused, I'm mostly talking about the state of the game around Sunbreak's release. That is all. Now, back to your regularly scheduled program. Now, I understand that most people don't really play Monster Hunter for the story. They play it because hitting big monsters with big weapons is pretty fun. So this might not be all that interesting to some of you, but I do want to go over it briefly, because I think they've somewhat stepped up the story and fleshed out the characters a bit more since World. The only game that could boast about having a decently solid story before that was 4, revolving around Gormagala and the Frenzy virus. Similarly, newer games usually revolve around a grand-scale mystery all throughout your adventure. It's not particularly brilliant writing, and they followed the whole first you eliminate a symptom, then you eliminate the cause, for all of the 5th generation now. But let's give it a shot. I'll keep it short, okay? First of all, people have names now, which, yes, that wasn't a thing for almost 2 decades. But that aside, let's talk base Rise really quick. You're the up-and-coming hunter of a small village called Kimura, hunting your way up the ranks. That village is home to a dangerous phenomenon called the Rampage, an event where hordes of monsters turn unusually aggressive and thrash around their habitat, eventually leading them to the borders of Kimura. Originally, everyone believes Magnamalo is the bad guy and the source of the rampage, but actually he's just a chunky boy, and the true culprits are two Elder Dragon seahorses who throw monsters into a fit of rage with their Elder Dragon aura. And also because they're quite ugly. Your task is to stop the rampage once and for all by taking out these two SeaWorld runaways, and after they commit cannibalism to unleash their true power, you beat your mother for good and get massively blueballed because everyone expected to fight their baby a la Xenojiva. But that didn't happen.
Denied.
So that's Rise done. Now for the Sunbreak portion, which is similar but a bit more cohesive. Overly angry monsters are migrating from the nearby kingdom to Kamura and other areas, which is bad. So, since the rampage isn't an immediate issue anymore, you're enlisted to head over to the kingdom and aid their royal order with this new problem. They inform you that it's probably the fault of Malzeno. Malzeno? Is this another Tigrex situation?
Bruh.
Anyway, a vampiric elder dragon, and this isn't the first time such a phenomenon occurred, as it happened a few decades ago, and each time it started with a giant abyssal crater, like the one they built their outpost on. I don't know how or why they expect a flying, averagely sized dragon to open up an enormous crater, but that's all they got. So you start hunting monsters for them and investigating Malzeno's whereabouts. Along the way you meet new characters and find out the reason for the over-aggressive behavior of most monsters, which is the Curio.
Suck.
A parasitic entity that drains the life force of its host, throwing them into a fit of rage. These guys appear to have a symbiotic relationship with the Blood Boy, and are mentioned to work similarly to the Frenzy Virus. On a fun side note, right after mentioning the Frenzy Virus as an equally dangerous past threat,
5 minutes later.
you're given a quest to hunt a Gormagala.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
And they just don't say a word about it. It's apparently not an issue around here. I guess the monsters are just built different. Regardless, you push on and eventually you locate and defeat Dracula Jr. And to everyone's surprise, it didn't actually fix the issue, as the Curio don't seem to die out and instead just ominously make their way towards the giant crater. So, you investigate further and find the true origin of this mystery. Guys Magorg, aka Dark Souls copyright infringement. It's not the first final boss that has a Dark Souls-like design, but come on, it's literally the cousin of the Gaping Dragon. Even the intro was pretty similar. Now, for the actually shocking development, the NPCs don't just make you do all the work, as Admiral GigaChad puts that thing on blast immediately.
Another one.
Oh, that is hardcore!
And you just head in there to finish it off. But even then he throws another Dragonator down just for good measure. Kinda feels like bullying at this point. Rain has her anime moment and you ultimately beat the giant vacuum cleaner dragon.
Suck.
And that wraps up the major points of the story. Summarizing it like this makes me realize that there are quite a few questionable developments and room for improvement, but the character dynamics are pretty nice. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it at that and move on to the more interesting parts of the series, aka combat, monsters, and everything around that. Transition. As always, we'll be starting off with the bad parts to get them out of the way quickly. These points will mostly revolve around Sunbreak, as the expansion fixed many potential issues of the base game, so we will focus on what's still relevant. Now then, Monster Hunter is a game that rewards attentiveness and curiosity in most of its gameplay. Be it combat or exploration, there are often signs telegraphing either danger or opportunity for the player, some more hidden than others.
Where the I am.
Monsters are carefully crafted, and the devs even think about small biological details. These monsters have a visible personality, meanwhile the maps are stuffed with detail and hidden secrets waiting to be found sooner or later. So oftentimes players feel immersed in the world and are very focused on their given objective. But an important element of Monster Hunter's nature is that it should be unpredictable, given form by invader monsters and the uncertainty of unknown threats, living or environmental. But Rise and Sunbreak somewhat spoil the surprise in many ways. In previous games, you were only informed that the monster you're setting out to hunt is present on any given quest. Aside from that, you may be given the information that there is another dangerous monster present, but you're fully unaware of its species and if there may be multiple threats around. Rise just immediately tells you what monsters are on the map, and where they are. Even if you have never seen them before, you'll have a giant moving question mark on your map. This immediately makes the threat of invading monsters basically non-existent. And even if any of them do interrupt you, they'll just attack the other monsters and initiate a wyvern ride. Now, for the record, I think wyvern ride is a fun mechanic. I just don't get why two monsters fighting initiates that feature. It's supposed to be triggered by silkbind and aerial attack, as the monster gets immobilized by remnants of the wirebug silk. That's what the visual implies. So, I'm not entirely sure why that interaction works the way it does. Regardless, spoiling the surprise doesn't end there, as Rise has even taken measures outside of the game to leave rather little suspense, since Sunbreak has presented every single monster, save for the final boss, in trailers. Now, you could argue that watching trailers is asking for spoilers, but I don't think showing basically every monster is necessary. After all, they're mainly meant as teasers to build hype. And unfortunately, these two main problems cover each other. Basil Goose is a good example to illustrate this. In Monster Hunter World, Basil was never shown in trailers. You weren't aware of its potential existence on the map, and chances are your first encounter with this guy was when it invaded your fight with another monster. There's a ton of people who get flashbacks to this guy, jump scaring them when they hear its theme song. And it's a very memorable moment for a lot of players. Now, Basil was actually added to Base Rise in its title update, as the only unannounced monster. Sounds like a good start. Problem is that they immediately put a quest specifically for it right in your face, before you even unlock the announced Elder Dragon quest. Even if its existence wasn't instantly revealed, it still wouldn't surprise anyone because it doesn't really do the whole invading thing anymore. It's mostly just vibing. Valstrax is more of an invader than it now, to be honest. But even he has to formally announce his ambush, which, by the way, ruins the point of an ambush. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a massive issue, and with the verticality this game has, it's hard to really hide anything, since you can technically just jump 50 feet above the map and scan your surroundings. So it's somewhat of a built-in problem that comes with the choice of elevated movement options. It unfortunately leads to less unexpected and memorable moments, but it certainly doesn't ruin the game as a whole. Moving on to the second and final negative point. This one is a bit of a personal one and might be more nitpicky, but I do feel like it's interesting enough to note. Sunbreak features many returning monsters, meaning monsters that originally appeared in previous Monster Hunter games. And a lot of these monsters originate from games released prior to World. Here it's important to note that the skill system has been reworked going from Gen 4 to Gen 5. So a lot of the equipment related to these monsters is gonna go through some changes. Most of these are pretty interesting and fun, but a few of them are kind of questionable. Some are minuscule at best, like slight changes to affinity and base damage, others bring completely new skills to the table, but one in particular is very peculiar to me and kinda disappointing. Now, bear with me here for a bit, because this one's personal. Let me introduce you to Seregios, also known as Steve, the flagship of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, a wyvern with quite a few unique attributes. For example, it was one of the few monsters that brought a unique skill tied to its weaponry into the game, meaning a skill not obtained through armor or charms, but rather built into the weapon. This unique skill would allow you to regain the sharpness of your weapon by dodge rolling. This has been removed in Sunbreak, as the skill has been moved to Seregios' armor, as well as independent decorations. Technically, this is a good change, as it makes the skill more flexible and usable in a variety of builds. But then again, I feel like the weaponry could have kept the skill, similar to Call of Wrath equipment. But as a Switch X player, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The way more tragic change here is that they switched the file type from power, as it was in prior titles, to dragon file. Seregios doesn't use any dragon element. I'm not gonna bore you with Switch X trivia, but basically, you want either power or element file in Rise, with exhaust and paralyze being a gimmicky but comfy alternative. You do not want dragon file. It is a meme. They made one of the best all-around Switch X's into a meme. And a lot of other weapon types also got dragon element on it for some reason. That is all.
You serious?
That's my negative. It's very minor and does not greatly affect the game overall. I'm just salty. And slightly concerned by the thought that the upcoming Lucent Nagakuga Switch X might turn into Poison File. But they wouldn't do that, right? Right? Anyway, that is all. Moving on. Now, I did warn you this was gonna be biased. We are talking about a personal favorite here. So get ready for a long list of good points. I won't go into too much detail for each aspect, so this doesn't turn into an hour-long review again, but it's probably still gonna take a while. Point 1. The visuals. Yes, there are people who hate the visuals because they directly compared to World. Yes, this game isn't made for the big home consoles, and therefore doesn't have the more realistic HD style of World.
Wow.
But that does not make it bad in any way. They went for a very unique and beautiful art style, making the absolute most of the hardware's potential. We're still talking about a game developed for the Switch here. And look at these visuals, they're sick. Look at the fire.
Wow.
Look at the cherry blossoms.
Wow.
Look at everything.
Wow.
While realistic Super HD graphics are nice, more vibrant art directions can do a lot for the overall atmosphere and immersion. And I think that it shows a very charming style for the traditional Japanese theme this game has. It's up there with peak Switch graphics. And how is the whole better graphics equals better game argument still even a thing? I don't understand it. Personally, I absolutely adore this art style and I'm really happy with it. But even if you are more of a realistic Full HD enjoyer, you gotta give credit where credit is due. On to point 2. Difficulty. Difficulty has always been a pretty controversial topic in the Monster Hunter fandom for a while now. The games of the 5th generation have definitely been easier overall. Not because the monsters got weaker, but rather because the hunters have become considerably stronger, with the ability to dodge backwards, more movement options and quality of life changes, like not needing to pose after every heal.
I'm in danger!
I'm honestly impressed they kept that feature for over a decade. Not even Dark Souls does that. Putting the discussion of whether this development is good or bad to the side, I'd like to focus on the design of G-Rank, which usually presents the peak difficulty of each respective entry. In older games, this step up was often naturally achieved, since G-Rank was only available in the online hub, and the monsters there were already scaled to be more tanky and dangerous from the get-go. Since Iceborne, every quest scales more dynamically though, and so they had to make some adjustments. For example, when Iceborne released, a lot of people took quite a lot longer than usual to finish quests, because they chose to make G-Rank monsters very tanky in comparison to higher rank. And only with more endgame equipment did people start to really cut down their clear times. Now, Sunbreak appears to have chosen the opposite approach here. From what I can tell, monsters aren't particularly tanky. Most of them go down quite quickly, but they pack a punch. And oftentimes they aren't done after just one. Iceborne chose to make the initial fights more of an endurance fight, yet Sunbreak chose to turn its combat into a fast-paced action fight that is shorter but more intense. And I think that's a phenomenal choice, as it pairs greatly with the incredible movement options the player has been given. In fact, it even addressed one of the issues of base rise, as the monsters felt unable to keep up with the player. Overall, I still wouldn't say it's insanely difficult or more difficult than older games, but I'd say it's a very entertaining difficulty. And chances are we're going to see an increased difficulty with the release of the title update monsters down the line. But another already present part of the game that greatly depends on difficulty is the endgame, which is exactly what we're gonna talk about next. Endgame activities have always been somewhat tricky in their design. They are supposed to be long-lasting while not feeling too repetitive. Making them too RNG heavy is gonna be frustrating, and they have to be rewarding while optimally not completely invalidating build diversity and variety with a singular OP set. Every game does it differently, and Sunbreak, similar to its story, chose an approach akin to Monster Hunter 4. In that game, monsters that had survived the frenzy virus and utilized its power for their own became known as Apex individuals. No, not like the ones from Base Rise, those are just bad translations. In the same fashion, Sunbreak's endgame presents you with afflicted monsters, which are monsters affected by the now desperate and hostless Curio, turning previously mediocre threats into powerful beasts. Now, the lower tiers are still mostly punching bags, albeit pretty damaging ones. No, don't do it! But the higher grade afflicted monsters are actually quite the interesting challenge. You can knock them out of their afflicted state by attacking marked parts, and if you fail to do so, they'll use a special explosion attack that does a ton of damage. But the best part comes in the rewards, as you'll get afflicted parts used to upgrade almost every single available weapon up to the highest rarity of 10, which I personally say is a very nice way of handling the situation. It makes weaker monsters relevant again, and gives most weapons at least a chance to shine. Obviously there are still gonna be select top tier weapons, but no weapon gets completely left behind and becomes borderline unusable just because it didn't receive any upgrade paths. And it also doesn't do much to harm build variety, as there is no unique armor connected to these parts. They're purely upgrade materials. Overall, it ticks a lot of the boxes for a good endgame, and I definitely enjoy the approach they've taken here. It's not perfect, they could have given them some new moves or anything to make them more distinct, and potentially tweaked some of the materials a bit, but it's a pretty decent solution, and do keep in mind that there will be new content coming with future title updates. So you'll get some more unique things to do in the future. Now, let's get to the two big points, the core aspects of Monster Hunter. Point 4, combat. Yes. The hunter part of Monster Hunter has received many upgrades, all across the board, and it makes the experience of hunting anything an absolute joy. Now, as I mentioned before, this game is very fast-paced, with extreme mobility and special skills reminiscent of a GU, which makes it quite different from World. Now, what you might not know is that this is mostly due to different teams working on these games. Well, sort of. Nowadays, there's a lot of overlap in the team, so it's not like they're completely separated from another. But the change in direction becomes very apparent, as The main team usually focuses on the core values of slower, methodic combat and the environment, while the portable team focuses more on the action aspect and often experiments with new skills and similar ideas. They effectively make the game more anime. Now, I love both of these approaches for differing reasons, but I just have a sweet spot for that anime combat feel. And my word did they deliver. From chaotic AoE effects to support visuals and insane switch skills, everything is ramped up to 11. I know a lot of people meme on most weapons getting a counter, and I get that, but most of them require solid timing, and when you hit them, it's really cool. And the overall feeling of combat just gets better and better. Hitboxes are precise, vertical ones are debatable, but it is what it is. And to me at least, it's just plain fun. On a side note though, I could go with less monsters getting the whole Rathian deal of I'm gonna walk at you and it will be a giant hitbox. I don't feel that as much. Regardless, the general combat presentation may be flashy and over the top, but telegraphing remains clear, so with some practice you can still control the chaos and keep it stylish as always. I'd keep going on about this, but it's mostly just me telling you how stuff feels for a while, and that seems weird. It's mostly an experience thing beyond the points I've mentioned. So, if you know, you know, and if you don't, I recommend you try it. That being said, final point, the monsters. Obviously, the most iconic part of the series has to get some well-deserved spotlight as well, and they very much so delivered on all fronts with Sunbreak. We have returning classics, creative newcomers, and maybe a bit too many subspecies, but the more the merrier, I suppose. Starting from the returning monsters, we have a lot of fan-favorite flagships that had yet to get the chance to get some glorious Gen 5 updates. This includes the previously mentioned Thregios alongside my boy Gormagala, and a second member of the Fated Four in Astalos, who looks absolutely stunning with its new prism wing effect. Crabs are also back, aka adding another completely new skeleton for Rise, which is nice to see. I still don't really like them, but Daimyo's flying fist is pretty cool, I'll give him that.
Falcon punch!
Also, furthermore, we got everyone's favorite monkey going Super Saiyan 2, and speaking of the Super Simian, one anime reference apparently wasn't enough, as the quest title and one of his new moves show. Moving on to the newcomers, we got one of the best flagship monsters period in Mazino, who teleports around utilizing a completely new blight, and has the ability to go into an empowered state, known as the Bloodening. Okay, the naming could use some work here, but in practice it is a really cool fight all around and boasts some very useful equipment to go with it. Hey! Aside from the main attraction, we have a few notable names, but largely new subspecies for Rise originals. The most notable one being Scorned Magnamalo, who is actually terrifying. And while I personally don't really like normal Magnamalo as it relies a bit too much on acrobatics for a monster built like a semi-truck, Scorned gets a pass. Partly because it focuses more on its Hellfire attacks, but also it just looks really cool and has a tense fight, so thumbs up from me. Monsters from base Rise have also gotten some rightful updates to make them feel more at home in Sunbreak's fast-paced combat environment, and Valstrax really hurts now. Mamma mia! Which, as a Valstrax enjoyer, I can appreciate. Most of the time.
1, 2,
Fatality.
Now, you thought I just glossed over it, you thought I forgot, but no. We'll be talking very extensively about the one and only, the return of the Rose Dragon, the phoenix rising from the ashes, the first frontier monster to be featured in the main series in over a decade, Espinel. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Monster Hunter as a whole, or just Frontier, allow me to explain the gravity of this inclusion. Monster Hunter Frontier was a Monster Hunter MMO, only released in Asia, that was online from 2007 to 2019. It featured a roster containing mainline monsters and a large array of unique monsters, as well as 2 completely new weapons, an altered Switch X known as the Switch XF, and a lot of events, locales, skills and whatnot. The size of this game and its legacy is enormous, yet most non-Asian players were often only familiar with clips showing over-the-top fights with ridiculous looking AoE attacks and over-the-top designs. And while that is a decently accurate description of Frontier's combat, it also gives you appropriate skills and options to reel in the chaos, resembling a combat feeling somewhat similar to Sunbreak's approach. Although Sunbreak is still noticeably more calm and controlled than most of Frontier's. But as I've stated before, I have a sweet spot for the anime aesthetic.
This is great. Everything about this says exactly what I am and who I am as a person. It's my defining trait. It's beautiful. Big too.
And therefore it shouldn't come as a surprise that I absolutely adore Frontier and think it looks incredible. Yet, unfortunately, the mainline games did not adopt any of Frontier's roster during all of their shared lifetime, with the exception of Levisioth and Hypnocatrice, close to the launch of Frontier.
Bruh.
Reports claim that the initial reason for this was Frontier players wanting their original monsters to remain exclusive, as they were paying a monthly subscription fee, but that claim is never really backed up. Chances are that the main team of Monster Hunter just wanted a more toned down, somewhat realistic world, which makes most of Frontier's monsters unlikely candidates.
Nope.
No.
Yes.
Nope.
No.
Yes.
No, 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 nope.
No.
Yes.
Yes. What the fuck?
With the portable team in the lead, we have a more flashy and combat-focused environment in Sunbreak that perfectly befits the antics of the widely regarded OG flagship of Frontier, the Thorn Wyvern Espinaz. I love basically all they did for this guy. The disrespect of it just sleeping and basically bouncing most of your attacks until it gets angry, how they kept its triple status fire,
Triple kill!
and the impeccable drip of its updated armor. I'll be honest, this might be my favorite visual armor set in Monster Hunter. In a game where some of my all-time favorite monsters are present, I still have to say this guy kinda stole the show for me. It's not particularly difficult or revolutionary in its overall fight, but seeing a Frontier monster finally ported to the main series again, while retaining most of its unique abilities, is pretty exciting. And I really hope it paves the way for more Frontier content coming to the mainline series in the future. And speaking of cool content coming in the future, let's talk about the massive roadmap, already giving us a taste of what kind of high-profile monsters we have yet to see in Sunbreak.
Damn, boy. Damn, boy, he's thick. Boy, that's a thick-ass boy.
Most notably, a classic that hasn't returned since its debut in 3 Ultimate, Lucent Nagakuga.
You thought you'd never see me again, didn't you? Well, too bad. I'm alive.
Bringing with it its original arena as well. This rare species was one of the most dangerous threats of the 3rd generation. But the really exciting part here is that this species has literally only had a singular appearance in the series, in a game where combat was hardly even comparable to the fluidity and speed of modern games. Back then, a lot of Nagakuga's general strength came from its above average speed.
I don't think you have any idea how fast I really am. I'm fast as...
But especially in Sunbreak, hunters can easily keep up with its mobility. So I believe we'll see a major update to this fight, and I for one am very excited for it. Not to mention its equipment was top tier in its respective game as well, so the reward for such a battle should be more than worth it as well. Simultaneously, Basil gets another chance at redemption with Seething returning to the scene, even though announcing him is once again somewhat counterproductive. But I guess more blast weapons is fun.
Watch your jet, bro. Watch your jet!
Yet, if this roadmap follows a similar uphill curve to Iceborne, we've only seen the floor level of hype, and there could be some very high profile threats waiting later down the line. Although I can't really ask for much more, this roster feels pretty much made for me at this point. But Chaotic Gore would be an option. Alright, I think I've gushed enough about the game, and I'll probably do it again once all title updates are out. So let's avoid making this any longer and finish it with a quick conclusion. As always, I don't think my general opinion is unclear, but for the sake of structure, let's make it crystal clear and add some final words on here. Honestly, I could have added some more minor stuff to the positive list, but I'll keep that for a full series review or something. I absolutely adore this game and wholeheartedly believe that it is on the same quality and fun level of Iceborne. Although it definitely highlights different core aspects of the series, Capcom has been delivering these quality products for a while now, so I'm fully expecting this game to just get even better with time. I didn't even mention this, but it's a rarity among game devs nowadays that you get a full game with hours of entertaining gameplay at launch. No microtransactions except for vanity, which is fine in my book. And no season pass or similar shenanigans either. All of the upcoming title updates are completely free. And if we're looking back at Iceborne, that's probably about a year of additional content for no fee whatsoever. Capcom has a lot of my favorite IPs, and I'm really glad they've been keeping the bar this high for a while now. So I think Monster Hunter has a bright future ahead of it. That being said, for now there is still a lot to do in Elgato, with even more on the horizon. While I do feel a bit sorry for some of the old veterans who aren't as into the newer games, I think the series has been going in a fantastic direction, and quality of life updates, creative new mechanics, and the devs just giving every game something unique and fresh have put the spotlight on all of Monster Hunter's strong points. After all, the numbers do speak for themselves.
Hey!
And if you feel bored already, maybe give online play a shot, or bring some friends with meme builds, or just play a previous Monster Hunter game for a while. That's the greatest aspect about these games. They all bring a different feeling with them, and I could absolutely see someone playing Sunbreak for 200 hours, then going back to Iceborne or GU for a bit, and returning for the next title update. This franchise has finally gotten the attention and budget it needed to capture a global audience, and Capcom went absolutely in on this opportunity, without ruining the core of the series. In my book, these games have been going uphill for a while now, and I'm just looking forward to every update or announcement they drop. So if you want a game that brings out the absolute best of the grindy but rewarding action RPG genre, featuring amazing combat akin to Souls, while giving you live service amounts of content without all of the dry, repetitive, partially paywalled, headache-inducing annoyance that's very common in today's gaming industry.
No! None of that! Shame on you!
Then please give Sunbreak a try. It's a very enjoyable entry point to the series with an honestly really extensive roster, boasting some all-stars from all of Monster Hunter's close to 2-decade-long history. Now, as I often say, it's obviously not the perfect game.
It's true.
But Capcom has been putting in work to respect the players and prioritize quality in their work. I'll probably be making more videos on this game as the title updates roll out, so I'll cut this now and keep it for some other time. All I've got left to say is, play Monster Hunter. And if you do, I hope to see you in Elgato sometime. Thank you Capcom for making another banger, and thank you for watching. See ya!